Okay, hi, I am Brian Cardell. I'm a developer advocate at Agalia, and we do these series of web history to try to catch a sort of oral history of the web and the people who helped build it along the way, so that none of this is lost in history. We think it's really potentially interesting. So today I'm joined by my good friend. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, Brian. Thank you. My name is Coralie Mercier, and we've known each other for about 10 years, I think.
Yeah, and you work at you work at the W3C.
W3C. Yeah,
Yeah,
I've been at W3C for 25 years. I think
25 years.
you can
Wow.
see now that I come with it. I started doing administration, and now I'm doing communication.
So I heard you tell a story one time about how you got introduced to the web, which is like a thing that I like to ask in all these web history conversations, because it's not a thing anymore, right? It's just like
Hmm.
being introduced to the web today is like being introduced to electricity, right? Like it's just part of the ebb and flow of normal life. So I think in these history things, it's fun to capture like how you went from the time before the web to learning about the web. And you had like a really fun story about how you learned about the web. Can you share it?
Yeah, I'm happy to. So I learned from the web before I actually knew what it was. I learned from the web by looking at the cover of a CD, which I dug for you.
All right.
That's the one.
Celine Dion.
Yeah. So
Nice.
it was on the back of
Mm-hmm.
the CD plastic thing, and I no longer have it, of course, but you can still see it like here at the bottom. And I remember seeing, for more information, connect with Sony online at http://www.sony.com. And I thought, I'd like to connect with Celine. I'm a fan of hers.
Huh.
And I was, I don't know, 19 or 20 anyway. And I thought, doesn't look like an address or a phone number. And I just puzzled over it for a while, and then forgot entirely about it because I didn't actually go to the web until maybe 3 years later.
I had to look this up because, preparing for this, we shared some notes and things. I had to look it up because that was, I think you said
96 or 5,
1996.
or 6.
Yeah. So like the W3C started in late 1994, right? And
Yes.
like the following year, the stats that I find say that like 1/5 of the United States and maybe 1/10 of the UK, those are just the only ones I could find readily, had access to the internet at all. But like the web, even in that, was fringe because mostly what that meant was email, right? Like you had access to email.
Academics.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. And it
Um,
was internet use.
the web was really fringe. So that's like impressive to me. I wonder how that came about, that like Sony already was like who at Sony thought we
Yeah.
should put that on. It probably was Celine. She was.
It could be, yeah. I don't know if others did it before. I don't know if Sony did it for all of the artists that they produced. And it's very true. According to the figures that we have in 1994, it was mostly the US and Canada which had access to the internet, and it was about 1 million users
So then, like a few years later, you did get introduced to the
to the
web,
internet.
like
Oh
to the
yeah, yeah.
internet, to the internet. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I got introduced to the internet before I discovered the web, and I didn't even know they were part of the same. I mean, they were. I didn't know the web was an application of the internet, but
Mhm.
I started to use IRC when I was in university. That was in 1996.
That's amazing to me. I didn't like use IRC, or maybe I did, but I didn't. I didn't think of it as our IRC.
Hmm.
until W3C.
Yeah, yeah, because we use it. Yeah, it's so I mean, it's very resilient, and it runs in even in a text program, which is how I run it still today. So, and we have built a number of tools that let us do things like bots to transform stuff that gets written in IRC
Mm-hmm.
into HTML minutes even. So yeah, we
Mm-hmm.
rely on it.
Yeah, CSS Working Group especially has a lot of bots and
Yeah,
things that post them to GitHub issues and all kinds of cool stuff. Yeah, so like how did you come to
to know of it.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
that was an interesting. I mean, I feel lucky to be able to tell that story, but because I think I heard it from the other guests that you had on this podcast. Like them, I was the beneficiary of incredible luck. The people I used to hang out with when I was in Edinburgh at university knew people who worked at INRIA, and INRIA was the first host of W3C, but I did not know that then. They were looking for a secretary, and I came back from Scotland, and I was looking for a job, and they said, "Oh, you should apply there," which I did, and I got the job, and that was 1998, and it was a 6-month gig, and then I was gone for another few months, and they called me again saying W3C is looking for to hire someone because INRIA wants to reclaim the staff that they lent them. And I applied and I got the job, and that was January 1999.
Well, when you were there, you were exposed to like a lot more
Tech.
nerdy stuff, right?
Oh, yeah. And I came from a pretty nerdy family already. Like my dad got us a Commodore 64 when my twin brother and I were kids. So we used to play pinball on it and stuff. But my dad used to do serious stuff. Like he would use the computer, and then we had other computers. But he would use the computer and program in Visual Basic or something else because he was a doctor, and he had to fill a number of forms, and he had decided that it was going to be easier to have the form in the computer so that he would just need to type something once and then recall that information. So every patient he was following had a file, and then he had made it so that all of the forms for Social Security could be printed on a dot matrix printer, and he created that program. So I came from a nerdy family, but the level of nerdiness that I encountered while at INRIA was, I mean, it was nothing like. I mean, I was not prepared for it, of course. I think I told you the story of the 1998 World Cup soccer championship, which
Yeah, I was hoping you would tell that story.
yeah. So I was the workstation I was using then was a Sun Spark station, and it was equipped with a bunch of Unix programs. So I got to familiar with that environment, which I knew nothing about. But well, my point is that a lot of things were done through the terminal, including watching the soccer world championship in ASCII.
That's amazing.
I don't know how they did it, but you visited some, I think it was some, I don't know if it was FTP or something else, but it was from the terminal. And what you saw, you had to go a little further back from the computer in order to be able to imagine that this was TV, but it was ASCII being morphing in front of yourself. I don't remember I don't remember what we did for sound. I have the impression that we had to maybe listen to the radio. I don't think it came from the terminal. Anyway, I thought that was crazy, and I told my dad when I came back, I said, we did this at work today, and it was like recess, school recess.
Right? Did you learn a lot working in that environment?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, because I was quite young, and everything that I had learned at school did not was not useful. to me then. So I had to learn new things, and working with a scientific team involved doing a number of things, including producing reports. So I learned LaTeX before I knew what HTML was. And I don't think even at the time, I recall that we used intranet more than we use extranet. So there was not a lot of things I needed for my work then. It was not W3C then. There was not a lot that I needed to be on the web for. Intranet was sufficient. So I learned LaTeX. I learned how to work with people, work in English, of course.
So then in 99, you went to W3C.
Yeah.
And I also, just to keep the perspective, I looked up the same statistics that we were just talking about. And it seems like at that point already about 26% of the US had internet at home and about 15% in Europe. 2% in China I was able to find. But like also that's the year that Napster came out. Do you remember?
Yes,
Remember
I do.
Napster?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. I
Napster
have.
was wild. It was fun, and probably all of us got way too many songs that
Yeah,
I
yeah.
had the best music library those couple of years. Some of what we did with Napster was still stuff that we're in a weird way on the web trying to catch up to because it was like peer sharing,
Yeah,
and it was like,
mods.
yeah, yeah. And so like you could create and share from your device. And that was like something that like even Tim's original browser was like part of the vision. Like you could edit with a kind of WYSIWYG in the browser.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
I think that translated over into W3C project at first too, right? Wasn't there a
Amaya.
yeah, Maya?
Yeah. Amaya was. Yeah, Amaya is was. Maybe some people continue to use it. We've decommissioned it because we stopped maintaining it since HTML5. Amaya does not support HTML5, so we made it open source and we'll put the source available so in case people want to port it. But Amaya was the first and possibly the only WYSIWYG editor. Like you could edit while you were browsing, pretty much like even better than a wiki, because in a wiki you have to go through the edit interface. So it was different. But yes, Amaya was a great browser, and I used it many years. And I think I stopped using it and moved to Emacs just when we stopped maintaining it, I guess.
Yeah, I think also like I guess sites have gotten more complicated because they involve like JavaScript and
Yeah.
CSS as well. Um, but even in that, like we have like dev tools and
Yeah.
they're still, even those are not connected in the same kind of integrated way that they were in early. I don't know if do you remember like Netscape also had
Oh, yeah. Composer.
yeah, Composer,
I
right?
do. Yeah. I think I used that the first. Yeah. I think I recall using it. I mean, when when I rented my first domain name, I think I started with that.
I think I might have too actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I found it great. And I still feel the hole in me that
Mm.
this particular tool left because it was not replaced as far as I can tell.
That's actually an excellent way to segue because also that year, uh, Blogger came out.
Ah,
That was the year that
yeah.
Blogger came out.
Blogger was nice.
Did you use Blogger?
Yeah, yeah, I did. I had a couple of blogs.
Yeah, it was. I think it was like a way to fill a similar hole, right? Like you could publish as well. Like it wasn't the browser doing it, but it was using the browser technology,
Yes,
and you
totally.
didn't have to worry about the hosting. Somebody would host it for
Exactly.
you.
Yeah, exactly. That was great.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then came WordPress must have come much later, but I recall also moving from Blogger. Well, I didn't really move from Blogger because I kept that blog, but I tried the my.opera.com community, which was exactly the same. They
Hmm.
offered you space. They offered you the tool, which was exactly the same. Well, exactly the same mechanisms as Blogger used, and I really loved it. And they sunset it at some point.
Yeah. So now I know you still have a blog
I do,
because
yeah.
I
It's
follow
not
it.
the same.
But it's WordPress, right?
It's a yes, it's a self-hosted WordPress, and I don't
Yeah.
like it. I don't
You don't
like
like
it.
it.
No, I don't.
You have a lot of posts though, right?
I do, yes, because I ported I ported to it all of the blog posts which I had created and wanted to keep. At the beginning of blogging, I don't remember. I don't know if you remember a software that was called Blogsome.
No?
And I no, okay, so it was at the time when we had Blogsome, movable type,
Hmm.
really the early era of blogging. And what I liked about Blogsome was that it could run on my machine and the posts could be just local. I would not publish them. So I used that as a diary. But some of
Mm.
the posts I liked, and I got those. I got the My Opera posts, some other posts which were on WordPress, and I moved everything together. So that blog published in I don't know 2005 maybe,
Hmm.
and I have about 500 posts. I try to post maybe once a month now. I used to post a lot more.
So now we have like ActivityPub
Yeah,
and some ideas, including one that was kind of created, championed by Tim Berners Lee. Uh, a lot of similar ideas in W3C that hopefully will, get some agreement on, and but ways to like own your, these are ways to like own your data more, and uh, work in like ActivityPub, working in owning your social media presence and everything as well, right? Like,
yeah,
I think it will be interesting to see what happens there, because I do think that um, some of those early ideas about like you being a publisher as well as a subscriber, you know, and then you owning that and not being like just what was on your Twitter or what was on your blogger or whatever, um, is really valuable.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. It's as though you remember the web dot something trends,
mhm,
web dot two or two
mhm,
two. I don't remember because I try not to use them because they are kind of meaning. Well, I find them meaningless because they have different meaning for
mhm,
different people. So one of that era was putting stuff on the web, and then it became something more complex. And I think we are at the I hope that we are at the tail end of the complexity, because you mentioned before how web editing became complex, and I
mhm,
remember when we used to look at the source code of a website in order to make your own website, and
mhm,
the the the, the homepage I have on the W3C website today for maybe my team page, I built exactly like that. I looked
mhm,
at somebody's CSS, and I tried to understand how it worked and do it. So and then all of a sudden we could no longer do that. It became,
mhm,
or I could no longer do that. It became too complex. So I think I hope we are at the tail end of that era where we can go back to a more manageable mechanisms and ways. So you you probably followed that Tim's uh, what is it? A startup. He created a startup called Inrupt, and he wanted to work on a concept which he calls solid. So he wanted that to have some kind of standing and use the process which he developed for the consortium that he founded. So after a year or two of trying to make this fit in a way that the broadest set of stakeholders can look at it, I think we eventually got there with the creation of a working group, which is not called Solid for obvious reasons, but it's called a linked web storage working group, and that is just getting started now. Like we started it last week or something. So, yeah, there is this.
Yeah, it'll be super super interesting to see what happens there.
Yeah.
Um, so you've been at W3C now since 1999. What was like the first big thing that you did at W3C? Like, what was? Do you remember your first TPAC?
Yes. I
Yes.
remember my first TPAC. It was in 2000, and I helped arrange it. Back then, I was part of the administrative team, and organizing meetings was a strength of mine. And I got to partner with colleagues in the United States. We
Mhm.
worked using wikis in order to do more efficient work. So
Mhm.
um, I remember my first CPAC, and I also remember the second because I organized it completely solo. It was in 2001, the
Wow.
first of a long series of TPAC meetings, technical plenary and advisory committee meetings that would be held in Mandelieu, which is in the southeast of France, in a huge hotel by the beach. So that was really nice. Yeah, I remember it. Yeah.
That's really nice. I've never been to one there, so looking forward to
Oh,
that one.
I thought you had at least seen it. We stopped in I think 2008.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think my first TPAC was 20
2012.
2012. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, so you could not have seen it.
Yeah. So you started your website in about the same time, right?
Um, yeah, I think so. 2002 or something. But it was not. I mean, my website is not a big deal. I just wanted it to learn. Basically, I wanted to learn, and it's more to have fun with it and be able to share links to photos with my family
Mm-hmm.
than anything else. So I think the first big thing I did at W3C was to put W3C on social media. Really, I mean, I
Yeah.
did a bunch of things, and I kickstarted a number of things at W3C and a number of processes and how. So it's really background work, like the way we do work. I did a lot of that to streamline processes or create new
Mm-hmm.
processes, but that's something that nobody sees. It's just background stuff. But putting W3C on social media and getting Tim Berners-Lee an account on Twitter is visible. So I was the one suggesting this and doing this. I think I still have his password.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I don't think he changed it because
Interesting.
I tried once.
He's not on there so much anymore.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
I think W3C has left Twitter as well now, right?
We have, yes, in December last year,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and we chose to be just on Mastodon, and we
Mm-hmm.
are hosting our own instance and on LinkedIn because
Sure.
it's the place to be. But
Right.
we started on social media in 2010, possibly even earlier, because when Identica was released, I think it was before 2010. It could have been as early as 2008 or 9, something. So we were on Identica, which is the grandparent of Mastodon.
Oh, really? I didn't know
Yeah.
that.
Oh, yeah,
Oh,
totally. Evan Prodromou, who launched
that's right. That's right.
Identica, was also had a say in Activity Pub. So it's been a long love story.
That's right. Yeah, I do remember that actually. Um, so since 1999, at least from the outside, it seems to me that like a lot has changed in the world and a lot has changed
Yes.
in the W3C.
Yeah.
Like, can you tell me like what are some? Yeah, I mean, tell me some ways that you think that the W3C has evolved. Like, what's some interesting history that you've seen in sort of the evolution of W3C?
I think the if I had to say one thing, I would say that we witnessed the whole tech ecosystem going from followers who were following W3C staff,
Mm-hmm.
which were the experts, and then there was a shift when everybody caught up, and now the experts are everywhere. So the dynamic had to shift at some point. It was, I think it was rather organic, but I remember that shift, and there was a bit of unsettled. We were unsettled at some point, not realizing. I mean, all of a sudden, it became clear, like we are no longer the experts. So there was this shift, and I don't exactly remember when that was. Probably between 2005 and 2010, probably closer to 2010. So there was that. I also, if there is a second thing I could say, is that we noticed massive surge of the work. Like at first we had, I don't know, maybe 20 working groups, and we thought that was a lot. And today we have more like 50 and 10 interest groups. And we think it's a lot. Maybe there is a time in the future when our staff increases, and as well as our capacity to spawn new groups increases as well. So there was this constant increase in the number of groups that we create, and we don't create groups for the sake of creating groups. We create groups because there is some matter for a specific group to look at. So they may be bundled in one a specific area doing pretty much the same thing, but they are all different. And then there are other areas which have nothing to do with one another. So yeah, we noticed as well that that surge, and it's because the web has become more powerful and is becoming still more powerful with the amount of things you can do with it.
Yeah. I think the creation of community groups and interest groups itself was a shift
Yes.
from before that, right? Because before
Yeah.
that, there was only working groups, and you like tall order to start up a working group, or taller order, because you do have to have, I guess, more consensus, more agreement that that's a thing that we're going to do,
And bandwidth.
more buy-in.
Yeah. And opportunity as well, because I think that you're right, that community groups, which we launched in 2012, I think, or 11, offered people an opportunity to gather and rally around new ideas and incubation, whereas before there were fewer opportunities, and or it was like fringe innovation and niche probably as well. So community groups were a way for new ideas to be socialized and incubated, and a number of working groups since then have been spun out of community groups and specs packaged by community groups for working groups. So that's very interesting.
Another thing that I think probably a lot of people don't know that maybe we can talk about. It shocked me that like there was no, like, you had to be a legal entity to join the W3C, but
Yeah,
the W3C itself was not a legal entity. It was this like loose affiliation of,
yeah,
um, you know, academia, basically,
yeah.
hosts. But now that's another change that's happened, right? Like in the past couple of years, W3C has become a legal entity.
Yes. So I think you're tackling two related but different things.
Okay.
You have to remember that the consortium was created in 1994. It was created. It was spurred by Tim Berners-Lee himself. He started to realize that there was a need to get the key players together so that the output of their work for the not the infrastructure of the web, but how the infrastructure of the web is used could be coordinated. And that was that the model that they used was based on the X consortium. So it was a member consortium. So you had to be an organization yourself. So I don't know whether you're talking so much about this aspect, which mandates that in order to become a member of the World Wide Web Consortium, you have to be an organization, but it's not actually true. What we are lacking is a fee for individuals. So any individual is welcome to join, and we've had one, maybe two in the past. one individual who joined as an individual. Turned out they had to pay as a small company because we have not priced it, because we work, the level at which we operate is more to the level of our big organizations who create products that are used on the web than at the individual levels. But you and I both know that there is improvements which could be made, and that the voice of individuals could be heard. And you and I did try with a number of others to create something which at the time we called Webizen,
Mm-hmm.
which would allow for a reasonable fee individuals to actually have a voice. Because at W3C, we have been welcoming participation from everyone, and we've done the work in the open, and we have, I mean, our process mandates us to take in the input from the public, which happens at any time on the recommendation track, but at particular times, which we call review times. So we do that, but we can overrule that feedback. Whereas when member weigh in, they weigh in with the power of their right, which is we call reviews also, which is confusing, but their review has some power.
Mm-hmm.
You said W3C changed and became its own legal entity. It's true that for 28 years we were the partnership of 4 academic institutions. Started at MIT, and then INRIA became the second host for Europe, and then Keio in Tokyo became the Asian host. And in 2000, so that was in, I don't remember the dates, but maybe 1998 for INRIA, or no, 1996 or something. And then a couple of years later for Japan. And then we had to wait till 2013 for China to join as a host with Beihang University. And 28 years after, boom, we created W3C Inc. It was at the beginning of last year. And we are a 501c3.
I think that's really exciting. I
Yeah.
think that part is really exciting because it goes to this, like, we're still figuring out how to do all this,
Yeah.
and I think one of the things that we realize, 30 years in, is that, like, we probably could use some more ways to fund this work,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
making something after having 30 years worth of trying to fundraise and do all these different things. One of the bits of feedback that I've heard a lot, because Igalia does, we work on open source for other companies. We work on web standards on behalf of other companies, and one of the things that I've heard a lot is that it would be easier for companies to do work like this if there were sort of like tax incentives to do it,
Hmm.
so that it
Ah.
made the work more sort of revenue, like, neutral. It made it seem like less of a hit that you have to take as a business. So if
Yeah.
there were some advantages, not advantages, incentives to this work, then it might be easier, and it will be interesting to see how true that is with W3C. I hope that it is very, true. Like, there are good reasons for big organizations and small organizations to uh, fund W3C, because you can make it a charitable donation. So
Yeah. Incorporating in the US as a 501c3 means that for US organizations,
mhm,
they can be tax exempt. So that's
mhm,
already the case. And I think that a number of US based organizations have taken advantage of it. I don't think it's true of other areas yet. But the point I also wanted to make sure to tell you is that so W3C is turning 30 years old, like in 3 weeks. So we are an old organization, but we resprung as this legal
Hey, not old.
entity.
Come on now.
I'm going to open a parenthesis and digress just a little bit. But when I was hired well, I had my job interview at the end of 1998. But when I was hired, I heard something like, we're really keen to have you, but you have to know that a consortium has a lifespan of about 10 years. So
Wow.
enjoy it while it lasts. So
Wow.
this is the perspective I'm coming from when I say that W3C is that old, because and it may be that the things have shifted, but consortia have a lifespan of 10 years. So, end of the digression. The opportunity of relaunching as a 501c3 and a public interest nonprofit also gives us an opportunity to decide, perhaps, how differently we may want to do things. Focus on things that previously we may not have been in a position to do, like focusing so much more on human rights or sustainability. I don't think that, and we've tried some, not that, but we've tried in the past to convinced our members to follow us in a particular path, and that has not worked. And maybe this time, because we are kind of respringing, we can, we can write our own story for the next 30 years.
I think this is actually a really interesting thing because it's, again, part of the whole like evolution. So, we start with W3C, we have like HTML, CSS came pretty quickly, MathML and SVG were very early. And then we got like accessibility as a focus in W3C in, when was it? 97?
Yeah, 97. Yeah,
And, now we have, some of the things that W3C helps organize and has experts in, even
yeah.
like I-18.
Internationalization. Yeah,
Yeah.
I-18N.
Internationalization. Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, I-18N, internationalization. That's maybe from 2000, sorry, not 2000, 1998 as well. So
Mm-hmm.
it's one of the early, we call that horizontal work. Do we? Yeah, we call that horizontal work because it spans everything, like potentially every tech, every specification will have to dab into a number of specific areas. Accessibility, of course, internationalization, because it became clear that there was not just Latin alphabet to be used on the web. So in order to welcome the scripts, even the writing directions, be inclusive of all these cultures. So it became obvious that we had to have some experts and continue to have experts. We had Richard Ishida as lead of that activity for many, many years, and he retired last year. And Fuqiao Xue picked up the slack. But we have other similar areas like privacy and security, which have been very long going as well at W3C, and we're hoping to create new ones in addition to these four. In particular, sustainability. We just hired a few people to look at privacy, security, and sustainability. Privacy and security because we had a gap to fill from many years ago, and sustainability because that's something we've wanted for a long time to dab into because we think it matters. Just the same way we think security, privacy, internationalization, and web accessibility matter. And also, I've personally been a very strong proponent at W3C of doing more for human rights. And I'm hoping that I can continue to convince the right people for, I don't know, maybe something next year.
I guess we should probably share, because it's not a given that everybody knows like how the W3C works, or um, since we're recording this for posterity, maybe 100 years in the future, somebody has no idea what the W3C was like at this time.
Hmm.
I'm sure they'll still be around. But so when a working group produces a spec and it wants to advance in the stages, one of the things that has to happen is wide review, and it's sent out, and you have to have as part of the process,
Yeah.
you know, internationalization, security, privacy reviews, accessibility reviews. So it's all part of this thing, like you were saying, called, like wide review.
Yeah. We look for the minority report.
Yeah.
Before I learned about the movie, the minority report in the
Yeah.
context of the W3C work was that small voice, that small amount of voices which were all saying the same things, which was quite different from the majority report. And we tried to make that match. So the staff at W3C have the expertise to foster the right conversations to happen.
Yeah.
Hinging on something which we call the W3C process document, which is a specification as well, and specifies how specifications are made. So it's very meta. The staff has the expertise to lead the working groups through that, in addition to having the overview of the rest of the working groups, so as to use their position as staff contacts to just make sure that things go the right way or give the right flags at the right time. That's what we do.
So you mentioned like sustainability and human rights. You had told me that you did some volunteer work, like Red Cross volunteer work in this vein. Tell me about that.
That was before my work time. Actually, that was when I was still at school. My twin brother wrote me in it. He said, "Oh, it's fun. We'll do some volunteer work at the Red Cross, helping people, learning also new things." And so that started several years of me going every week or every month at the Red Cross and becoming part of a community. It was then that I started to think, I wanted to, when I grow up, when I'm an adult, I want to work in the humanitarian, for a humanitarian NGO, and I want to travel and help people. One of the things I also did learn there was to give first aid and to handle crisis. And as part of the training that I got there, I learned about such thing as triage and choosing the right priorities given compared to any situation or context, and that has helped me immensely. I didn't know then, of course, that it would become helpful to me, but it shaped a number of the ways I approach things. And later, many years later, I was doing some kind of assessment of my career, and the guy I was doing that with told me after 3 weeks of consulting every week, "You are right where you need to be. You wanted to do humanitarian work. You're doing some kind of humanitarian work." So that, and I realized, yeah, that's right. And I remember from many years ago when we used to say W3C is the United Nations of the web, and I don't think that analogy continues to be true, but it was really true then, circa 2000 maybe. So yeah, I think I'm right where I want to be. I continue to be in awe of the mission that we have. We are a non-profit. We operated like one before, although we were not. So yeah, things are falling into place.
What is an effort or two that, like, if you can say this, if you can't, that's fine, but that you saw, come through that, stalled or is hung up or just never came to fruition or whatever, that you thought, boy, that was really exciting, without plugging for a group or technology or anything, but just like an idea or, like, is there anything?
Yeah, I can think of two, and one I probably want to go deeper than the other, but I remember from years ago, we were kind of hopeful to be able to have an influence in policy. So we wanted to charter a policy interest group, which was going to look at, it was many years ago, like 2008 or something like this. It it was expected to look at ethical things, and that's the kind of policy work that we wanted to do, just to make sure that technical standards were technical and policy met, basically.
That's really interesting.
Could be that this chapter, which was never published, may see the light of day. I don't know, or maybe we do this differently. But at the technical level and feature levels, one thing which I've been keen about is monetization on off and on the web, for the web ecosystem on the one hand, but also for the individuals using it or living off it. So yeah, I remember micropayments, the efforts in micropayments and micro donations. Yes, that's something that I continue to be interested in.
So if anybody has read my recent blog, you know that preparation for this is where that came from, because Corley sent me a hole to fall down, and I just fell and just kept falling, and then eventually she sent me a text that said, "You're very far down in the hole. Maybe I would like a rope instead of another link."
Instead of more links. Yeah, you were very surprised that micropayments was a work area at W3C even before I joined in 1998.
Yeah.
In 1997.
Yeah. So thanks so much. I hope that this is like interesting to other people. If not, anytime I get to chat with you, have a great time. And
me too.
I'll see you next week, I guess.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing you. Thank you for having me, Brian.
Thank you for coming on.